Warning, the following video features graphic and explicit images of a Rickenbacker bass modified with EMG pickups. If you are a purist, a traditionalist, or simply get offended by people doing whatever they want with their own instruments, choose another video now.
So, as Patrick Hunter would say, this is my 2003 Rickenbacker 4003. We're going to listen to it, we're going to talk about it. Obviously, I put some EMGs in there, but before we get started, here's an obligatory tone of what it sounded like when it was stock. So like I said, this is a Rickenbacker 4003 made in 2003. I got this bass used, of course, on Reverb. I ended up trading just straight across the board, trading a Dingwall D-Rock Standard for this guy right here. And as you can see, for a 20-year-old instrument, this is actually in really good shape. The finish looks great. Everything on it was stock with the exception of the bridge. This is the Hipshot Rickenbacker Standard Direct Retrofit replacement bridge. So this being my first Rickenbacker experience, I can't really tell you what the original bridge was like. All I can tell you is that I've heard bad things. So this is probably something that I or someone else would have done down the line anyway, so that's just kind of a bonus that we get the cool Hipshot bridge on there. I'm not really going to spend a whole lot of time talking about what this bass is in general because you likely already know, and if you don't know, I know I made a little Patrick Hunter joke earlier, but he does have a great video on the current line Rickenbacker if you don't have one and wanted to go buy one right now. His video is really indicative of what you can expect to get right out of the box. Instead, we're going to focus on what most of you are probably going to consider sacrilege, that being right here, these EMG pickups. These are one-of-a-kind, custom-made, passive mini humbuckers that we're going to talk about a little bit more. But again, let's hear it stock one more time. Just a quick disclaimer, almost all of the tones you're going to hear in this video are fed into a Tech 21 VT bass with these settings right here.
That's textbook pandering.
So the last tone that you heard had the tone knob on the bass rolled down a bit, but they're all running through the same preamp with the same settings. So let's talk a little bit about these pickups, what they are and why they're in there. So like I said before, this is my first experience with the Rickenbacker bass. I've never owned one, I've never really had the chance to sit down and play one. Every time I've gone to NAMM, there's zip tied to the damn hangers, so you can't really play it outside of just, oh wow, that's great. So I had in my head of what I thought this was gonna sound like because I'm a big Rush fan. Geddy played one, Chris Squire played one, Cliff Burton, Lemmy, Paul McCartney, but of all those players that I listed and more, I would say Geddy Lee is probably my number one in terms of people who played the Rickenbacker bass. So the first time I plugged this in, I had this sound in my head that was reminiscent of something off of Hemispheres or Farewell to Kings, and it didn't sound anything like that. Now again, maybe this is just because I don't really have experience with this bass and maybe I just don't know how to coax it out of it. Or perhaps it has to do with it being a 2003 model because the pickups that come stock in the 4003 are wound a little bit hotter and a little bit darker than the 4001, which is the actual bass that Geddy played on Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres and 2112 and all of that stuff. But the other important note is in 2006, I believe, is when that push-pull treble bleed capacitor, whatever the hell that thing is called, the thing that you pull and it's the vintage circuit, that came out, I believe, in 2006, so this was 3 years before that. So this is just that sound. You got your pickup selector, obviously your Ricka sound thing, your stereo vibe, but that's basically it. There is no push-pull, it's just hotter and a little darker. So just that alone was kind of making this a little bit disappointing in terms of what I thought I was going to hear versus what I did hear. And to make matters worse, the stock pickups have those big screw pole pieces that protrude quite a bit higher than the face of the bobbin. And the problem that arises with that is when you hit the string a little too hard, the tone is cool, but the string hits the pole piece, giving this big pop click sound that just doesn't work in any mix. Obviously, one fix is to lower the pickup, but then you're kind of changing the output and the overall response and the vibe, and you kind of want the pickup close enough to the string to punch and sound good. But when most of us would play it, we would just hit the pole piece over and over and over again. So again, being a first-time Rick owner and not measuring the stock pickups, they look about the same size as mini humbuckers. So I went to EMG's website, I looked at their mini humbucker line. They don't feature anything passive just on the website. They have the M80, the M50, and the M60. But I asked my friend Anthony, can we do something passive for this project? So what these are is this is the passive version of the M80. So officially speaking, this is an M80HZ. The DC resistance on both of these is 8.26 kiloohms. So they're pretty much at vintage spec, and they almost fit with little to no effort. Now, the reason I say almost is because they're not exactly the same size. They're close. At far away glance, without measuring, they look about the same. As you can see, I kept the stock metal ring from the neck pickup, so I pulled the stock pickup out of that metal ring, and I thought it was going to be easy enough to put the mini hum into the metal ring, and it wasn't, because these are a little bit... I get a little confused sometimes on the dimension of the pickup, like which direction is length and width and height, and but from this direction, like E to G, they're a little bit shorter than the stock, and then in this direction, like tailpiece to nut direction, height, I guess, they're a little bit bigger. So it didn't perfectly fit in this cap, but with a little bit of encouragement, I got it in there. I basically just got the ring hot and then pushed the pickup in, and you can see, if you look up close, it's ovaling just a little bit, like the top and bottom aren't perfectly straight, but again, from far away, it looks pretty good. And then same deal with the bridge pickup. I just kind of MacGyvered this a little bit. I drilled 2 holes into the pickup plate that it would mount to. And then I just used some pickup mounting screws and some nuts to kind of fix the height in relation to the mounting plate, and then leave the overall height adjustment how it would be stock with these 2 big outer screws here. And as you can see, they look pretty sleek. So obviously the first problem of the big screw pole piece is gone. You can hit this string as hard as you want, and even if it hits the plastic, it's not hitting the magnet. So you might still hear the touch, but it's not a big deafening pop. So that part's pretty easy and obvious to see and understand, but I think the bigger question is, what do they sound like? Well, this is the thing that's interesting, is the bass overall doesn't sound that much different. It still sounds like a Rickenbacker because, again, the specific wind of the pickup is only really one piece of the equation. You have the placement of the pickups. Some people would argue the material of the bass, the way it's constructed, this is an all maple neck through vibe with a slightly shorter than standard scale length. All of those things are going to feature into the tone, just at different degrees of importance. But as we saw recently in the Rickenbacker versus the LTD video, the pickup placement, I think, is probably the biggest factor in determining the overall tone of what an instrument sounds like. So with that being said, it's not 100% identical. I've always likened pickups to being the microphone of the instrument, so it still sounds like the Rick. It's just got a slightly different coloration in some of the frequency response that these pickups will put out. I will say too that these pickups are a little bit lower output, so it's a little less hot going into the amp. Outside of that, there is an increased treble and mid-range response, but nothing crazy to, again, it doesn't sound like a completely different bass. It sounds like the same bass with the blanket kind of lifted off of it. But even that subtle increase in those mid and treble frequencies really brought this bass to life, in my opinion, of what I had in my head of what the Rickenbacker bass should sound like based on the records that I've listened to growing up that feature this, or the 4001. it sounds much closer to that. Again, it was a subtle jump to the right, but it did it. So let's listen to a few samples of the stock pickup back to back with the EMG pickup. Now these are the only tones that are not going through the VT bass. They're actually going through the Arkham Zephyr or the Arkham Oracle. They're kind of the same thing. One's a rack mount, one's a pedal. But I'm using that because it's a little bit more, buzzword alert, transparent. It gives you some flavor of what an amp would do, but without coloring the tone too much. So let's check it out. So again, as you can see, it's not like 100% different. It's not like switching it out for some big fat StingRay humbucker or something crazy like that. It retains the same characteristic vibe, just slightly enhanced. Now I know enhanced is a subjective term, but to my ear, it's slightly enhanced. So like anything in life, while these are, in my book, overall an upgrade and improvement to what my ear wants to hear, it's not without its downsides. So let's touch on the couple downsides that this has. First of all, because they are a little short, again, dimensions, they're a little shorter this way, string to string, that if you pluck this string a little too hard, it'll slightly fall off the magnetic pole. As you can see, I'm looking in the monitor. As you can see, it doesn't take a lot of force to pull it slightly out of the magnetic field. It's not a huge deal, but it is there. And then the second con, which it doesn't have to be this way, it just happened to be this way with me, is I chose to go with EMG's solderless wiring kit. So in doing that, you kind of eliminate the ability to switch between standard and the Ricco sound just by plugging into various jacks. In the standard setup, I just went basically Les Paul wiring, 2 volumes, 2 tones, 3-way switch, and output jack. And up to this point in this video, those are all the tones you've heard. They're all Les Paul wiring. Now, if you want to commit to the stereo thing, it still can be done, but you're pretty much locked into only having it run in stereo all the time. So it's kind of like having 2 different P-bass wiring setups in one bass. So it's neck pickup, volume tone, output, bridge pickup, volume tone, output, and the switch is disconnected, so it does absolutely nothing. So like I said, the bass currently sits wired in stereo. The switch is inactive. It does absolutely nothing. And like I've said a bunch of times, this is kind of my first Rickenbacker experience, and it's also my first real stereo experience, and it is so fun. So at the moment, like I said, it's basically two P-bass circuits. It's pickup, volume tone to output, other pickup, its own volume tone, and its own output. So if you have some headphones handy, now would be the time to put them in, because I've got the neck pickup going to the right channel and the bridge pickup going into the left channel. And it sounds like this. And then if I just turn one down, turn the other down. And then I've also got the independent tones. So it's just a really fun way to get 2 different signals, and when everything is wide open, it's got a little bit of a different character than everything wide open going through one output. Not to mention the flexibility of running one pickup to one amp and one pickup to another amp, and you can do all sorts of cool stuff, whether you want to stereo pan it, put everything down the center with 2 completely different tones that you can adjust independently. I had a tremendously fun time yesterday recording a handful of samples in stereo like this and running each pickup through kind of a different setup, just to achieve some tones that I couldn't really otherwise get just plugging in and going. So here's a couple of those tones that I dialed in, and let me know what you think. I had to leave you with a few final thoughts on not only this instrument as a whole, but this specific one that I'm holding, after doing the pickup swap, I was more happy with it than I was when it was stock. It's still kind of got a body shape and style and just, you know, a weight and a balance that I'm just kind of still getting a little used to. I wouldn't say that it's bad, it's just still a little new to me. And I also have to say that after wiring this in stereo, the way I currently have it set up, is just a huge eye-opening experience for me that, again, I've never really gotten to do, and I'm having so much fun with it that my plan was to wire this in stereo for the video and then put it back to standard because that's just, you know, comfort zone. I think I'm just going to leave this in stereo and just deal with recording 2 signals and maybe reamping 2 signals into stereo effects or what have you. But I think down the line, I do want to experiment maybe with some different pickups as well. I'm going to try taking a little inspiration from Cliff and Lemmy. I want to try to put like a Thunderbird pickup in the neck and maybe a jazz pickup in the bridge. I'm going to keep them passive, so it'd be the TBHZ and the JHZ, just to see what that sounds like. Because this neck pickup on its own is not bad. It's a little weak, but the bridge pickup, which, I mean, these pickups are identical. The bridge pickup is loud. It's pretty bright. It's kind of like an upper mid-range type of bright. But it's definitely loud, and the middle position, when this is wired in just kind of the standard one output way, the middle position sounds awesome. That's probably the best sounding tone that this bass can output. But I don't know, again, that stereo thing is just super fun, so I might leave it. I'm going to leave it as is for a little while. I'm not really in any rush to put the Thunderbird pickup in there, but I am curious. Let me know your thoughts, because I can do a Thunderbird pickup. I can, if I really wanted to go nuts, I can put like a StingRay MM style pickup in there. And I can pair that with, I can leave this pickup as is. I can put the J pickup in there. There's a number of different things we can do, and I'm not really in the camp of let's not touch this because it's sacrilege and let's leave it how it was when McCartney played it. I want to make it sound good for me, and I want to make it fun for me to play. So if you like it stock, cool. As long as it's fun for you to play and it's inspiring for you to play, that's really all that matters. I thought I was going to catch a lot of flack for doing this. So I put a couple little feeler polls out on Instagram and YouTube and wherever else I put them out. And I was kind of shocked to see that a lot of people resonate with how I feel, of just make it work for you, and that's the most important thing, because I was under the impression that if you touch this in any way to mod it or change any parts, you were going to like get struck by lightning, because that's how some people are, and that's just not how I am. So if this video did upset and offend and hurt you, I guess I'm sorry. But if you're still watching at this point in the video, I'm assuming that you weren't hurt and offended. So thank you for watching. And I think that's just about all I have to say about that. So YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, blah, blah, blah. And I will see you next time.